On Masters of Spin this morning, how Scott Morrison pulled Google into line after the company threatened to stop operating in Australia. The government had outlined new regulations requiring companies like Google and Facebook to pay media outlets for news content they put on their sites.
But Google flatly refused and told a parliamentary hearing that Australians could be stopped from even using the search engine. However, after the Prime Minister had a meeting with Microsoft about making Bing Australia's leading internet search engine, Google's changed its tune, and yesterday it even announced that it is now paying some media companies for their content. So our Masters of Spin this morning to discuss, advertising and marketing experts Dee Madigan and Matthew Bywater. Morning, guys.
Morning.
This is, I guess, for the media company's perspective, a win of sorts. What do you think? Nothing like bringing in your competitor as a threat.
Look, I think Google were never intending to leave Australia.
Yeah.
They just make a big threat and then the government says, oh, no, well, we're going to go with them, and then Google says, oh, we'll pay a little bit of money then. You know, these things are almost preordained.
A lot of quite transparent posturing on both sides, isn't it?
100%.
I felt a bit sorry for Bing in all of this, though. I heard their managing director talking and was asked the question, well, you do know that people just use Bing to search for Google to get it up, whereas they were coming out with all of this stuff saying, look, we think we do need to pay, and saying all of the right things, and now everyone's just gone back to Google.
Yeah.
Is Bing the loser here?
Well, they've got a little bit of publicity, which is more than they usually get.
Yeah.
You can remember, Google is so massive in Australia. It's 90-something% market share. And this is why they're never going to walk away. It's $4 billion they make out of the Australian market. They're never going to walk away. Quite frankly, it would have been catastrophic for a lot of companies in Australia who have spent a lot of money on SEO, use Google Drive and Google Apps for their domain. So it would have had a lot of impact on Australian business. So we really did not want them to leave. But this is a good thing for the Australian government to stand up and say, this is what we want, whether you believe in these
Played well
laws
for
or not.
Scott Morrison, didn't it? Yeah.
A new union campaign hitting the airwaves opposing the federal government's planned workplace reforms. The Attorney-General has described this as insensitive and disgusting. Let's have a look.
Lower wages, less power and worse conditions than ever. The Omnibus bill will hurt Australian workers.
So, Dee, this ad is from your agency. You're behind this.
Yep.
It's some really, really strong criticism, the most disgusting piece of advertising I've seen, and that this is, deeply offensive, for example, to families who may have experienced road trauma.
Now, this is extraordinary that it comes from Christian Porter, who's been the free speech man. Like, he literally brought in laws to let religious people make fun of other religions. Like, he literally brought in laws like this. So it's funny that free speech seems to apply only to the stuff that they want to say. Now, this is a visual analogy in the ad. What's offensive is workers having their wages cut. Christian Porter, this is the man that they had a Four Corners episode about his friendships with junior staff as while he was married. That's the thing that should be offensive to politicians.
But does that mean that he can't then say, hey, that's a bit much, looking like you're about to mow down a group of people?
Except it's a visual analogy. It's clearly a visual analogy, like, say, the older AIDS ad. And, they must have learnt very quickly the Streisand effect, because they didn't say anything after Monday. Now, the views of the ad started at 2,000. Once he said that, they went up to about 200,000, and then they haven't said a word since.
But you are right, and we should be able to look at it in a sophisticated way. But, you obviously weighed up a number of ways to get this key message across. And some people say that, the violent tones here just aren't right and are insensitive to people who've suffered road trauma.
Well, I don't think anyone who's suffered road trauma is putting up their hand to say that's the case. It is clearly a visual analogy, and we want workers to know that this is happening and that they need to get on board the campaign.
And it's your job to also get attention.
Absolutely,
and you've done
100%.
That. So, yeah, OK. Interesting chat about that. Now, to one of the banks flexing its muscle with some corporate morality. It's been reported that St George, the major sponsor of the NRL Dragons, stopped the club from pursuing controversial footballer Israel Folau. Now, the Dragons were apparently preparing to apply for Folau's registration to play. Of course, he ended up parting ways with the Wallabies over a homophobic slur, or several of them. Matt, what do you think? This is a pretty big deal, isn't it, for the sponsor to come in and say, and then that's it?
Yeah, and I suggest it's not the first time this has happened. There's been a few other instances where we're pretty sure they got involved and said, we don't want you taking part of that.
Does this play well for St George then?
No, it's terrible. And you'll remember, what we're now learning is that Folau was shopped around to the Broncos and the Titans, two teams that could quite frankly need a lift with a player of his capabilities. They both walked away and said, no way. So the St George board have looked at this and not looked at the risk. Now, he's an exceptional player, no doubt. He would have done well for the club.
I meant St George Bank.
Oh, St George Bank, yeah. But they're going to look at but St George Bank don't want to touch this. Remember, and it's not just the Royal Commission. Nobody wants to be involved in this. They don't want this associated with their brand. So there was a huge risk. They're going to lose that sponsorship. And it's a major sponsor.
And this is a case where someone's personal brand is damaged enough to actually hurt the club's brand and then the bank's brand. This is the longest sponsorship, I think, in league history, and it's worth $1 million.
And remember, negative has a far higher power factor than positive.
Yeah.
So there's like a credit debit bank. And so if I say something positive about you, that gives me a credit. If I say something negative about you, I get 10 debits. Yeah, and this is the problem with this
we
thing.
hear a boo 10 times louder than we hear a cheer.
Yeah.
Yeah. OK. Dean,
Interesting chat, guys. Thank you very much.
Really good. Ahead for